Welcome, everybody. Today, we're going to talk about 3 questions that were asked recently. And I encourage all of you, if you have questions yourself, feel free to message me. I'm more than happy to answer any of your questions. This is one of actually, I think, 2 videos I'll be doing. I got another pair of questions that was really good today as well. So I'm going to make sure I get videos for both of those done. This first one comes from Cody, I do believe, and we are talking all about classes and extend. And the questions came up like this. How do you go about breaking down classes for a project? At the same time, where should one start? And last but not least, how do you go about knowing which classes should extend into other classes? So let's start with the first answer. Breaking down class. How do you know? Well, let's talk about what are these classes, and kind of where do they come from? If we come over to actually Mozilla's docs, and I encourage all of you, for any of you out there becoming developers, already are developers, or want to be developers, documentation is a lifesaver. So when we talk about answering this question by breaking down classes, I first come to, okay, well, what is a class? Let's talk about this as we break this down. Well, a class is nothing more than a special function, all right? Has a couple components with it, but it's nothing more than a function. Like, you can create the exact same thing with a function. I mean, as it is here, it says it's a special function, which the terminology special function, kind of surprising they put the word special there. But what I mean by this, right? What am I getting at? I'm getting at this. We can see a class. This is what a class looks like. You have the class declaration, you have the name, you have a constructor. Oh, how do we make these? That's a very normal question to come up at this time. And so I want to show you first and foremost kind of what is a special function? What is this all doing? So before we get into making a class, like a traditional class that you see now out of ES6, we're going to bring it back to ES5 and before that, and how you actually used to make classes in JavaScript. And you used to make them just like this. You would declare a function, you give it the name, you capitalize it because of it being a class, or what we're having to call a class. Doesn't have the keyword, but it still is a class, and it takes in the parameters to set it up. Now, what's interesting is back then when we did like this, you had to do a lot of if checks, like if there's no name, then name equals no name, potentially. You do lots of other stuff. The beauty now in ES5, you can just do default parameters up here, like such. But we're going with the ES5 example for the moment. But I'm going to take this out. I just wanted to show that real quickly. And this is all you had to do, is you had to give it to this context and say, hey, this dot name equals the name being passed in, and this dot weight equals the weight being passed in. Now, if you want to make a function, there's a couple different ways, but one of the most common ways is to use the prototype. And prototype here, we're just making a function, so you can call it, and it returns the name and the weight in pounds. So if we happen to make a new mammal, a new instance of this function, we would be able to then use the prototype of get info. This was a class back in ES5. So anytime you think about a class, or you see these convoluted classes, have no fear. You can always break down classes to just regular functions you've seen before with some prototypes, things of that nature. You could also always return back. This is one of the ways I will do as well too. I'll create a var self equals this. I'll change these to this. I'll come in here and say self.getInfo equals a function. I'm just going to do this for the moment just to illustrate, and then you could do a return self. So if you didn't want to get too confusing, like put stuff out there, prototypes, and get really advanced, you could keep it all in one function just like this. For the purposes of showing this off, I want to bring it back to this because this is one of the most common examples you'll see around or something of this nature. Now, this, when we talk about breaking down classes, this is what it breaks down to. It's just a function. And it's a special function at that. when we talk about and you're looking at classes such as, we're going to take this now and go over to the example and comment this out. We're going to go down to the example of this. I built a mammal class for us. If I can get my cursor on here correctly, I built a mammal class for us to check out. So how do we know, how do we break this down and understand what's going on? Well, it's much like we saw before, but now you have this constructor name. This is just a variable, so never mind this, just a variable declaration internally, much like saying something like this, dot state equals blah. That's great. But how do we break this down and understand what's happening? Well, there's a couple things we need to break down. We need to break down what functions do we have, what variables do we declare or have, and what is the constructor asking for? Because the constructor is just saying, hey, this is what needs to be passed in to create a mammal, right? At the same time, these are the operations you can do with mammal. You can get their info, you can tell them to go to sleep, you can wake up. So these are kind of like our actions. This is our data, and this manipulates our data or does something with our data or reads our data, sets or gets. I'm not going to put sets and gets in tonight's video, but they can do that as well. And so when we're looking at this, this is how we break it down. Now, where to start, right? Why do you need classes and why are they extremely beneficial? And this will tie into how do you know when to use extend. But the thought process here, where to start, is commonalities. You need to start thinking about classes when you have commonalities together. So for example, I pulled together the mammal class tonight for you. And why is that? It's because it's going to come very evident and clear here in a minute with the mammal and human class with extends. Now the reason I pulled the mammal class together is because if I wanted to make a mammal object or a mammal class or mammal functionality or some type of script that had something to do with mammals, there's a lot of commonalities they all have together. So if I wanted to create some type of script that would tell when this mammal or this object has gone to sleep or when it wakes up or what its weight is, this functionality has a commonality of it all revolves around a mammal. All right, and so when you have things like this, you bring them together. Another prime example you will see around to make a class on is when we start talking about geometry potentially, because geometry would be a great class because it's all about shapes and lines and figures. So if you wanted to potentially make a different a polygon, a rectangle, those have a lot of commonalities to geometry. Or did I miss geometry? Maybe it's not geometry, it's whatever. I think they have it here in some of their examples. Yeah, rectangles. Yes, rectangles and polygons and all this fun squares and calculations. And yes, I might use the wrong word there, but oh well. Point being, there's a lot of commonalities around this. So when we're looking to create them, we need to think of something that's together. So the reason why I brought up the human and the mammal example goes right into extends, and this goes to the whole commonalities between them. Because if we're wanting to make, say, a human class, I'm going to end up commenting this out, but we're just going to assume it worked. If I wanted to make a human class, they have commonalities with a mammal. Now, potentially at some point, I'll make also a class for, a crocodile or something, a croc, and it extends. Nope, that is not a mammal. I don't know, an elephant. Actually, I don't actually know if, I'm pretty sure they are. I know the animal kingdom real well. But point being here, you could extend mammal and make an elephant class. Now, why is this? The commonalities between mammals are mammals always have a weight. They have a living state where they're generally sleeping or eating or living. They have a name generally, whether we call them an elephant or not. They have some type of weight attached to them. They have generally a birth date. So there's some commonalities between this. And they always, at some point, have to go to sleep or wake up. They're not nocturnal. They go to sleep. I think nocturnal is just staying up at night. Forget what I'm saying tonight. I'm on some other crap, I guess. Jeez. But you will have to go to sleep at some point. You have to wake up. And so those are some commonalities that all mammals share. At the same time, I want to make a specific human one. And humans can speak, right? At the same time, they also set alarm clocks. And this is the prime example for extend. You always want to extend. You always want to extend because you never want to write code. What do I mean by that? I was actually focusing on my rules lately that I'm about to put out here soon in like that free boot camp course. But I was going to make a video on the rules. But one of the rules is that I think I'm going to solidify is never write code. It's like a catch-22 here. Never write code. What we always want to do is reduce and reuse. Basically refactor, hashtag recycle. And that's why you want to extend, because if you do not have to rewrite code 10 times over and you can write it once in one class and extend it and reuse it and reduce it to very minimal, well, it makes extending fall right in line with that rule. So now we're able to extend this as a human and create, so instead of creating a name, weight, and all this good stuff again and knowing if they're awake or sleeping, I can now extend the mammal class and know that, hey, I still need a name and weight. I'll pass that right to the mammal, which is whenever you see the word super. But I do have the ability now, I don't need the actual async. I do have the ability now to make my human, say hello with it, tell it to go to sleep because it's a mammal function, check the state of the human, which will say sleeping, and then say, hey, human.set your alarm clock. And I had a whole timeout in here, but I ignored it and it calls the actual function from the mammal that says wake up, which will change the state to living. Well, it really should be, I guess it should be awake. That would probably be a better state. Awake. I like that. All right, so I'm going to hit run here, and if we pick this up, you will see, hello, my name is Jason. They were sleeping state, and since the alarm clock went off, they are now in awake state. All right. Extends is very beneficial when you do not want to rewrite code and you want to use other functionality built elsewhere. Now, last but not least, hoisting. There's a note in here. This is not a typical function. So in the past, you could, it's declared right here. Well, you could in the past say like, oh, human, so on and so forth. You could do this and hoisting would let you because it's a function, but not anymore. This actually with classes does not get hoisted. It gets treated such as a variable. So just as a side note, I want to make sure that it comes across that you will have to use it in proper order. You can't use it above when you declare, you have to use it after you declare it. So overall, looking at these answers for this tonight, when we break down this, we need to just make sure we're looking at, or when we're breaking down, we need to know that, hey, they all relate to ES5 functionality that you know and love, easy to pull down. They're just special functions, and they're functions at the end. Some of the context is they have a constructor method, which is much like a function, how you had pass it in before, but the constructor is the initial time when it's constructed the first time. Down below are generally your functions, your actions. Your data is either in the constructor or right above it and declared. And this creates one object that has everything for you between the data, the actions, and a lot of the information you need. The beauty of classes is you can extend them into other classes so you can reuse your functionality from the previous class. In our example tonight, mammals will extend the exact same sleeping, awaking, eating functionality right into humans, which all humans have. And then you can take the human and just add the extra things that pertain to humans, whether they're setting their alarm clock, whether they're going to play sports. And this is where you always look to extend that gives you the functionality you need and then some. And last but not least, remember that hoisting is not the same as it was before. Now that is going to do it for us tonight. I know you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, please feel free to either leave them in the chat. I will hit save on this. I'm going to comment it out and hit save. I will hit save, comment it all out, hit save, put it in the chat. If you have any questions, feel free to message me. If you have your own questions that you need help on, message me on the page, on my Facebook page, or Slack me, whatever way you know how to get a hold of me. And then I will happily answer any of your questions. I'll put this in the chat now. Hit enter. There we go. That's in there. If you're on YouTube watching this, I will make sure that it is posted in the description down below. Have a wonderful rest of your night, everyone, and we'll be in touch.